That morning, I had no reason to leave the house, just a vague hunch that pushed me to grab my keys and drive to the old bank on Maple Street. As I walked in, I saw my daughter-in-law, Briana, in a cream suit, talking to the branch manager. She was holding a stack of medical papers, her voice clear. "She's no longer mentally competent. The doctor has confirmed it." I froze, as if every sound around me vanished. Then a cold truth slammed into my chest. She was plotting to take everything my husband and I had built over 40 years, but Briana had no idea what I did next that morning would make her pay dearly for every lie. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Marjorie Hale, 69 years old, a widow for almost 7 years. I live in a small white house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, where my husband Robert and I once planted rose bushes along the porch. My life is simple, steady: make coffee, read the paper, tend a few small cacti, then stroll the neighborhood. I never imagined I'd witness what I did that morning, my own daughter-in-law, standing in a bank, calmly burying my dignity and freedom with a stack of forged documents. Before I walked in, I thought I'd just stop by for a few minutes to check the savings we'd opened back when Robert was alive. I still prefer banking in person over online, partly because I like talking to real people, and partly because I can feel a little of our shared memories there. Everything seemed normal that day. Sunlight through the glass, the smell of coffee from the machine behind the counter, the receptionist's friendly smile. I had no idea that a few more steps would take me straight into a nightmare. I recognized Briana immediately. She stood about 20 feet away, poised, blonde hair neatly pinned up, her voice crisp like a speech she'd practiced. Beside her was Mr. Jenkins, the branch manager I'd known for years. I used to send him a Christmas card every year. Today, he was listening intently, nodding along. I slowed down and slipped behind the divider between two teller counters. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Instinct kept me from moving closer. I heard Briana continue, "We just want to make sure Mom's assets are protected. She doesn't recognize many family members anymore. Dr. Whitmore recommended we move forward with legal guardianship before there's a financial risk." I nearly stopped breathing. Dr. Whitmore? I've never seen any doctor by that name. A chill ran down my spine. Through the gap between the panels, I saw her open the file and present it to Mr. Jenkins, an obvious stamp, signatures, medical forms. She added, with practiced sympathy, "This has been very hard for us, but it's necessary." "We?" I repeated silently. "So Daniel knew about this too?" My son, the one who held me when his father died, who promised I'd never be alone now, silently letting his wife stage this entire con. The room went blurry, as if someone had sucked the air out of it. My heart pounded, my hands shook. I gripped my purse strap to steady myself. In my head, I heard Robert's voice, "Don't let anyone lay a hand on what you worked for." I took a deep breath. I couldn't just stand there. I stepped out. The flat heels of my shoes clicked sharply on the polished tile. Heads turned. Mr. Jenkins looked surprised. Briana whipped around. For a second, her face went pale, then snapped into a fragile smile. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Her voice caught, stiff and unnatural. I straightened, clutching my bag. "I came to check my own accounts," I said, calm enough to surprise myself. "And you seem to be doing that for me?" The lobby's air went heavy. Mr. Jenkins glanced between us, clearly uneasy. Briana tried a smile. "Oh no, you've misunderstood. I was just making sure everything's safe. The doctor said you've been—" I cut her off, firm. "I've never seen any doctor named Whitmore. And I haven't authorized anyone to handle my finances. It seems we have a serious mix-up here." Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat and turned to Briana. "Miss Briana is Mrs. Hale, correct?" Briana faltered, looking down at the folder, then up again with a shaky smile. "There must be a misunderstanding. I was just Trying to get things ready in case she gets confused. My voice dropped harder. Confused? Like confusing my actual signature with this one? I held out my hand for the documents. Sensing something wrong, Mr. Jenkins passed them over. I flipped through quickly, and within seconds I saw it. The signature was fake sloppy strokes, missing the distinctive pull I've used my entire life. My pulse jumped. I looked Briana dead in the eye. "You forged my signature!" Her lips quivered. She forced a laugh. "No, Mom, maybe a teller." "Don't call me Mom," I said, ice cold. "Someone trying to bury me alive while I'm still breathing doesn't get to call me that." The lobby fell silent. The young receptionist froze behind the counter. "Mr.?" Jenkins looked down at the file in my hands, then said more sternly, "Mrs. Hale, I think we should pause this process and verify everything." I nodded, never taking my eyes off Briana. She swallowed and stepped back, clutching her purse. I saw her gaze wobble, her confidence peeled away. I stepped closer, low enough for only her to hear. "You just signed your own sentence, Briana." I turned to Mr. Jenkins. "Crisp. Please freeze every account tied to my name and anyone other than me. I'll provide proper identification today." He nodded immediately and signaled a staffer. While he did, Briana mumbled something incoherent and hurried out, her steps leaden. As the glass door closed behind her, I stayed put. My body shook not from fear but from a cold, steady anger that felt almost like calm. I knew everything had changed. I walked out with the file in my down hand and crossed the lot. Sunlight flashed off the hood, making me squint. I sat behind the wheel and gripped it tight. My heart still hammered, but I knew I'd just secured the first weapon in a fight they didn't realize they'd started. The drive home felt longer than usual. Cold air slid in through the cracked window, carrying the piney scent of the old neighborhood. In the rearview mirror, I saw my own face, tired but not weak. A woman who'd lost a husband and lived with loneliness can endure a lot, but she will not be declared incompetent so someone else can steal what she built. And I knew that morning was only the beginning. If Briana thought I'd sit quietly while they erased me, she was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. Never come for a woman you think is frail when she still remembers every number, every signature, and every secret in the bank. Driving home that morning, Briana's words kept echoing. "She's no longer mentally competent." The sentence cut through me like a dry, cold blade, and years of memories came rushing back, vivid enough to hurt. I remembered the first day Daniel brought Briana home. She was in her early 20s, then soft blonde curls, a bright smile, confidence shining in her eyes. I saw my younger self in her, quick, lively, full of spark. Daniel held her hand and looked at me with hope. "Mom, this is the person I want to spend my life with." I smiled, genuinely happy. After years of Daniel burying himself in work, I just wanted him to find someone who made him happy. We held the wedding in the backyard where Robert and I had planted lavender and climbing roses along the white fence. Briana wore a simple lace dress, glowing in the sunday. I told my best friend that day, "I feel lucky Daniel found a daughter-in-law who's educated and well-mannered." Back then, everyone adored her. Polite, attentive, socially smooth. Family members said, "Your daughter-in-law is a gem." I felt proud, lucky even. Life stayed peaceful until Robert died. After the funeral, the house felt frighteningly empty. The laughter, doors opening, morning greetings gone. Daniel visited often, and a few weeks later, it was Briana who suggested, "Mom, why don't we move in with you? The house is big, and I can take better care of you." I was surprised, touched. Not many people these days choose to live with their mother-in-law. I asked, "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be a burden." Briana smiled, touching my shoulder. "Not at all, Mom. We want to be close." I believed her. I believed the way mothers do when they want to see the good in their children. So they moved in. At first it was pleasant. Briana woke early, made breakfast, asked if I wanted tea or coffee. She called me Mom, in a sweet, sincere tone that made it hard not to respond. Evenings, the three of us ate together, talking about work, neighbors, and memories of Robert. Sometimes I'd look at Daniel's smile and feel a rare peace. "You can rest now, Robert." Briana even encouraged me to get out more. She signed me up for a senior yoga class nearby and bought me a new teal sweater. One fall evening on the porch, I told stories about the old days when Robert and I started our tiny accounting office. Daniel leaned on his wife's shoulder, smiling. The warm porch light over the three of us made me think I'd found home again. Then, like all things too good to be true, the changes crept in. It started small. One night, when I went to pay the electric bill, Briana said, "Mom, let me do it. I'm used to these websites, no risk of typing something wrong." She sounded reasonable. I nodded. Help is help. A few weeks later, she said, "Let me reorganize your financial papers, Mom. I can consolidate accounts so they're easier to track." "Everything's online now." I hesitated, but Daniel chimed in. "Let Briana handle it, Mom. She's great at this." She studied finance. So I gave her the file cabinet key, then, little by little, my online banking passwords. All because I trusted that a daughter-in-law helps her mother-in-law. At first, she reported every expense. She printed statements, left them on the kitchen table, even used pink sticky notes. Plumber, $85. Car insurance, $140. I appreciated the neatness. I even told a neighbor, "I'm so lucky my daughter-in-law handles everything. I don't have to worry." I didn't realize I was cutting the last thread between me and my autonomy. Time passed, and the help became habit. Every new bill, "I'll handle it, Mom. You rest." Then she started retrieving my bank mail. She said, "Mail's mostly ads now. I'll screen it first, saves time." I nodded, unconcerned. I trusted too much. One morning I checked the mailbox earlier than usual, empty. Briana stood in the kitchen holding a few envelopes. She flinched when I walked in, then forced a smile. "I was going to bring these up for you." I smiled back, not suspecting a thing. Daniel got busier out early, home late. Briana ran the house, meals, finances, repairs, taxes. I felt like a guest in my own home, but told myself, the kids want to help. Nothing wrong with that. Late one night, trying to confirm a routine checkup, I found my bank email password had changed. I asked Briana. She smiled. "I updated security." "Don't worry, I saved everything." I nodded, though something felt off. I pushed the doubt away. But the truth is, every time I gave up a small bit of control, I handed Briana a bigger piece of power. I remember New Year's Eve when I wanted to donate to Robert's favorite charity. Briana stopped me. "Mom, wait until the new year. We've got lots of expenses at the end of the month." I stayed quiet. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had to ask permission to use my own money. Only when I sat in that bank and saw her holding papers with my name stamped on them did I realize this had been set up for a long time. Every small step, every sweet word, every dutiful gesture, just a polished cover for a scheme I helped enable. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was knowing I'd smiled and opened the door for the betrayer to walk right in. I don't know exactly when things went off track, but the smallest details always spoke first. One morning I checked the mailbox like usual. I love flipping through a paper or two, a few envelopes, sometimes a postcard from an old friend. But that day, it was empty, just a torn ad. I figured the mail was late and forgot about it. The next day and the next, same thing. I asked Briana, "Have you seen my mail?" "It's been a week, no bills or notices." She answered lightly, "They probably switched to electronic, Mom. I set that up so nothing gets lost." I nodded, it made sense. But when I asked for statements or forms to sign, she said, "Don't worry, I printed everything. I'll hold on to it so it doesn't get misplaced." Soon, Nothing arrived at my address. Even thank you letters from charities I'd supported for years disappeared. I chalked it up to the Times everything online now. Only when I saw a new bank card did I pause. One afternoon, Briana walked in, beaming. "Mom, the bank sent you a new card." They upgraded their security and reissued everyone. She held it up, then added casually, "Let me keep it for you since you tend to leave your wallet in your coat." I hesitated, then let it go. She'd been paying bills for months after all. I smiled and nodded. She slipped the card into her own wallet like it already belonged there. I started to feel out of control without knowing why. Then the doctor's appointments. I've kept regular checkups every 6 months since Robert passed. I called to confirm my slot, and the nurse sounded surprised. "Mrs. Hale, we got a message from your family to move it to next month." I froze. "From my family? Who called?" She said, "A woman named Briana Hale. She said you were tired and needed more rest." A tightness caught in my throat. I'd never authorized that. When I asked Briana, she smiled, too gentle to be angry at. "I thought you forgot. You said you weren't ready that day, so I rescheduled." I shook my head. "I don't remember saying that." She laughed. "You've had a lot on your mind." That answer, which sounded harmless, kept me up all night. I began to realize that whenever something seemed off, Briana always had a soft, reasonable explanation, so reasonable it made me doubt myself. Daniel, my son, seemed more distant by the day. He used to ask, "Did you sleep well, Mom? Do you need my help with anything?" Now it was different. He came home late, and dinner was usually just two women sitting across from each other. When I asked him, "Have you noticed I'm getting less mail lately, or that my doctor's appointments keep getting moved?" He brushed it off. "Briana's probably handling that for you. She's good at this stuff." His voice was flat, not a hint of concern. I looked at my son and felt my throat tighten. Did he not know, or did he choose not to? Then one day, I stumbled onto something I couldn't talk myself out of. That afternoon, I went to the bank alone to take out some cash for a gift for my granddaughter. The teller I knew pulled up my account, looked at the screen, and said, "Would you like to confirm the transfer from last Tuesday?" I frowned. "Last Tuesday? I didn't make any transfer." She turned the screen toward me. "A receipt for a transfer of $2,800 to an account under the name Hale Consulting LLC. I'd never heard of it. At the bottom was my signature, or more accurately, a clumsy version of it. My skin prickled, my heart raced. I asked for a printed copy and took it home. That evening I showed it to Briana and asked, "What is this?" "This statement shows a company I've never heard of." She glanced at it and gave a thin smile. "Probably a bank error. I'll call them tomorrow and get it fixed." Then she slipped the paper out of my hand so fast I couldn't hold on to it. "Don't worry, Mom, everything's safe." I studied her face, trying to find a hint of embarrassment or remorse. Nothing. Calm, almost confident. That night I sat alone in the living room, the warm light falling on the family photos on the wall. In one frame I'm smiling between Daniel and Briana, their hands on my shoulders. Back then, I thought I had everything. Now, looking again, all I saw was something hollow and unfamiliar. I started thinking about the old days, me and Robert working late in our tiny downtown Portland office, my hands always ink-stained while he made me coffee. We built every dollar with sweat and trust. And now, in just a few months, a young woman was taking it all piece by piece with polished charm and caring words. From that day, I paid closer attention. I quietly checked the file cabinet. Several folders were gone. Some envelopes I'd tucked away in a drawer had vanished. And the bank card? Briana still kept it for me. I realized I no longer truly knew what was happening with my own finances. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman being pushed to the edge of her own life. Not by shouting or force, but by sweetness, by words so gentle they numbed my defenses. That's when I began to understand. Not everyone who takes from you breaks in through the door. Some walk in with a smile and a warm "Mom." And only when it's too late do you see they didn't come to love you, they came to take your place in your own home. Nothing special happened that morning. The Oregon sky was a rare, clear blue after days of rain, the first rays slipping through the curtains onto the polished wood floor. I made coffee like usual, turned on the local radio, and heard about a traffic jam on the Morrison Bridge. Everything was normal until something felt very wrong. A low restlessness pressed in my chest, like someone whispering that I had to go somewhere, right now. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the fatigue of age. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became, a quiet, stubborn call. I set down my cup, grabbed my keys. Maybe I just need some air, I told myself. No makeup, no change of clothes, just my gray cardigan and the soft-soled, worn shoes I wear to the market. I didn't know where I was going, but my hand had already turned the key and started the old Subaru. Instinct took me to the Maple Street branch, the small bank where Robert and I had saved for more than 40 years. That place held so many memories. Opening our first account after the wedding, Robert's big smile when we finally paid off the house, the day I set a new passbook on the desk and said, "We did it." I parked beside the row of maples just turning yellow. Sunlight flashed on the building's large glass, reflecting my shadow on the pavement. I stepped out, pulled my sweater tight, and felt a cool breeze slip through my hair. It was so quiet I could hear twigs snapping under my heels. The glass door opened. The air smelled faintly of coffee and freshly printed paper. Everything was just as I remembered: the light wood reception desk, the carefully vacuumed blue carpet, and the photo behind the counter, serving our community since 1974. But within seconds, I knew something was wrong. At the far end by the branch manager's desk stood a woman, and I'd know that posture anywhere: Briana. She wore an elegant cream suit, blonde hair pinned high, makeup flawless enough to erase any trace of fatigue. Beside her stood Mr. Jenkins, the branch manager who sent flowers when Robert passed. He was bent over a thick file Briana had set down, while she spoke in a voice that was soft, confident, completely composed. I stopped behind the stone column near the entrance, not ready to say hello. From there, I heard every word Briana said. "Mrs. Marjorie Hale is no longer able to manage her finances," she said softly but clearly. "Her physician has confirmed progressive cognitive decline, so we just want to finalize legal guardianship. It's all in her best interest." It felt like someone yanked the rug from under me. My breath caught. For a moment, I didn't know if I was awake or dreaming. Mrs. Marjorie Hale, my own name, echoed through the familiar lobby like they were talking about someone dead. Briana went on, even offering a polite smile. "Here's a copy of the medical record. Dr. Whitmore confirms mild dementia and recommends limiting independent financial activity." I watched her open the file and hand it to Mr. Jenkins. White paper, a round red stamp, a sloppy signature. Even from a distance I could read the first line: "Patient, Marjorie Hale, 69 years old." I went numb. That was my name, my age, and they were twisting my life. In that moment, the pieces of the last few months snapped into place like a cruel puzzle. No mail at home, a new bank card, rescheduled appointments, and now this paper, the final piece I didn't want to see. A cold ache spread through me. I felt like I wasn't standing on the floor anymore, like I was watching from above as my daughter-in-law, the one who called me Mom, calmly erased me from my own life. Briana kept talking in that steady, administrative tone. "We don't want the accounts to be abused. She's forgetful at times. This is just to protect my mother-in-law." Protect. She said it with pity, and I heard the sweet poison in her words. I looked around. A few customers sat waiting, no one paying attention. Only me, the person truly on trial without being in the courtroom. I wanted to step out and shout that I was lucid, that this was fraud, that Dr. Whitmore didn't exist. But my feet felt nailed to the floor. My hand trembled. I gripped my pocket to steady it. I heard Mr. Jenkins's voice. "I understand, Miss Briana. We just need to verify a few details before we transfer authority." I closed my eyes for a second. A flash Robert's gentle smile in our small kitchen years ago. "Never let anyone else hold the title to what you've built." I opened my eyes, took a breath, and felt anger rise steady, no longer afraid. For the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to be betrayed by someone you trusted completely. I tightened my grip on my purse and walked toward the desk. My heels struck the tile in firm beats. A few people turned. Briana kept talking, unaware I was almost there. I had only one thought. If she could write me out of my own story, then right here where she chose to bury me, she would face the truth. So I took one more step, ready for the confrontation that, I later realized, changed everything. The air in the lobby felt thick. I stood at the entry, inhaled, squared my shoulders, and moved forward. My steps weren't just footsteps, they were the start of a fight. Heads lifted, conversation stopped. Morning light flashed on the glass, throwing a long shadow of me across the stone floor. Briana stood by the manager's desk, still holding the pen she'd just used. At the sound of my steps, she flinched and turned. For a split second, her face froze, then melted into a flimsy smile to hide the panic. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her voice was dry and strained, like she was trying not to choke. The branch manager, Mr. Jenkins, looked unsettled. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Mrs. Hale, I thought you weren't able to." I stopped at the desk and looked straight at Briana. "You might want to say that again, Briana," I said slowly. "The incompetent person you just described to him, she's standing right in front of you." The room went rigid. A few people in the waiting area looked up, holding their breath. Briana clutched the edge of the desk, her eyes drifting for a beat. "Mom, Quiet." I didn't raise my voice, but the tone silenced her. I held out my hand, voice like steel. "Give me the file you just submitted." "Mr." Jenkins hesitated, but my eyes didn't leave room for refusal. He handed it over. The paper was warm, still smelling of fresh ink. I opened it and read. It didn't take long. The flaws jumped out in seconds. My signature sloppy, tentative strokes, a smeared red stamp. The line, "Physician, Dr. Andrew Whitmore," tightened my jaw. I did accounting for decades, read hundreds of legal files. I knew that stamp wasn't from any real medical board. I looked up, set the file on the desk, and turned it so Mr. Jenkins could see. "These papers are fake. The stamp uses the wrong font. This doctor doesn't have a license in Oregon. And this signature," I tapped the first page, "is not mine." "Mr." Jenkins frowned and took a closer look. His face shifted from surprise to displeasure. Briana stood her ground, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're misunderstanding, Mom. I just wanted to keep your money safe. You've been forgetful, and I was afraid someone might take advantage." I cut in, low, and clipped. "Protect me?" With forged medical records, a forged signature, and a plan to declare me incompetent so you could take it all? She blanched, stepping back half a pace. "No, I wasn't trying to—" I took out my phone, started recording, letting the beep sound aloud. "Mr. Jenkins," I said, eyes still on Briana. "Please confirm who submitted this file this morning?" He hesitated, then answered. "Miss Briana Hale. You weren't present." "Good." I turned to Briana. "Everything you say from now on is on record. I won't let anyone rewrite my story." She swallowed and tried to steady herself, but her voice shook. "Please stop, Mom. You're making everyone misunderstand." "I was only trying to help." I cut in, sharp as a thin blade. "You weren't helping. You were taking. You erased me from my own life and planned to stand in my place." She inhaled hard, then tried to swing back. "You're embarrassing the family. People will think I'm a terrible person." I met her eyes, cool. "No need to think. Now they know." A murmur spread through the lobby. Tellers pretended to work but kept glancing over. "Mr." Jenkins motioned to a staffer, likely to call legal. I stood tall, eyes never leaving Briana. "I want every one of my accounts frozen immediately, including any joint accounts with her name. And Mr. Jenkins, please prepare a written incident record. I'll sign and take a copy for my attorney." He nodded, face grave. "We'll take care of it right away, Mrs. Hale." I heard the rapid clacking of keys, then a printer. Briana sank into a chair, chalk white. She forced out a weak line. "You'll regret this. You're tearing this family apart." I answered, low and measured. "No, Briana. Truth doesn't destroy a family. Only lies laid as its foundation do." She broke into tears. Not out of remorse I knew too well, but out of fear. Fear of what she couldn't control anymore. "Mr." Jenkins handed me the file stamped for temporary hold, his tone formal. "You can take this to your lawyer. We'll send the originals to Regional for legal review." I took it and tucked it neatly away. Then I looked at Briana one last time. She stared down, shoulders shaking, blonde hair covering half her face. I wasn't angry anymore. What I felt was cold, clean, and hard as metal. I said, softly, just for the two of them to hear, "I let you into my home. I gave you chances. I trusted you. And you paid me back with a careful betrayal. But you forgot something, Briana. I don't quit when I'm underestimated." I turned to Mr. Jenkins with a faint smile. "Thank you. I think I've taken enough of your time." He nodded and stepped back. I turned and walked out. Each step was slow, steady. Behind me, Briana's hoarse voice rose. "You can't do this. I'm the only one taking care of you." I stopped at the threshold without looking back and said quietly, "If that's your idea of care, I'll take care of myself." The glass doors slid open and the wind rushed in. The noon sun was bright enough to sting. I squinted, but inside I'd never seen more clearly. The breeze lifted the hem of my gray sweater like a flag just raised. I drew a long breath, the crisp autumn air filling my chest. In the car window's reflection, my face looked older, maybe, but my eyes weren't weak. I was still the woman who'd weathered enough storms to know that some battles you don't choose, but once you're pushed into them, you win. I opened the door and glanced back in the rear view. Briana stood there, small in the reflected light. I lifted one corner of my mouth, not from joy, but because her mask had finally fallen. When the engine started, it blended with the wind. What happened in that lobby wasn't just a counterpunch. It was the beginning of a fight, one with no room for mercy. As I turned onto Maple Street, sun filtered through blazing maples onto the steering wheel, and I whispered a promise to myself. From today on, no one writes my life for me. When I pulled into the driveway, the late afternoon sun was fading. Maple Street was as calm as if nothing had happened. Inside me, everything had shifted. I turned off the engine and sat for a long moment, hands still wrapped around the wheel. From a distance, I saw a figure on the porch. Daniel, my son. He stood, with his arms crossed, face set like he was bracing for a storm. The door opened, and there was Briana on the sofa, eyes red, tissue in hand. Months ago, I might have softened at the sight. Now, it looked like a clumsy play. I walked in and set my bag down. The house was so quiet it felt heavy. No one spoke for several seconds. Only the clock ticked, and my heart beat slow and steady. Daniel spoke first, trying to steady his voice, but I heard the wobble. "Mom, I think you're misunderstanding. Briana, she only wants what's best for you." I looked at my son for a long time. Those eyes once filled me with pride. Now they hurt. "What's best for me?" I asked softly but firmly. I took the file from my bag and set it on the coffee table. The dry thud echoed in the still room. Is forging my signature what's best? Briana let out a small sob, fists clenched at her skirt like she was the victim. Daniel glanced at her, then back at me. His eyes dodged mine, unable to hold my gaze. In them I saw not just confusion, but fear of losing the fragile comfort he was clinging to. "Mom," he said slowly, his voice fading. "She just thought you needed help. She didn't mean to." I cut him off, my voice lower, but so cold it even chilled me. "Didn't mean to?" "She brought forged papers to the bank, said I'm no longer competent, and signed my name on a power of attorney form. You call that didn't mean to, Daniel?" No one answered. Briana lowered her face, tears running down her cheeks, but I knew she wasn't crying out of remorse. She was performing, and the only audience she needed to convince was Daniel. I turned to my son, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Do you know what they told me this morning? That she's no longer capable of managing her finances, that I need a legal guardian." Daniel clenched his fists but still said, "Nothing." "What does your silence mean, Daniel?" I asked, my voice starting to shake with anger. "Do you agree with her? Do you think I've actually lost my mind?" He looked up, pain in his eyes. "No, Mom, I don't think that. But you know, lately you've been forgetting things, misplacing papers, mixing up appointment dates. Briana's just worried." I let out a dry laugh, the sound slicing through the room like a knife. "Worried? She rescheduled my appointments without asking. She keeps my bank card, opens my email, intercepts my mail, and now she wants full control of my assets. You think that's worry, Daniel?" The air in the house sank. I glanced around the kitchen behind us, still had breakfast dishes in the sink, the faint smell of coffee lingering. The heart of the home, once warm with laughter, had turned into a cold battlefield. I looked at Daniel, slow and aching. "Do you know what hurts me most?" He didn't answer. I nodded slightly. "It's not that Briana deceived me. It's that you let her. You didn't protect me. You protected the person who's hurting me?" Daniel closed his eyes as if my words hit harder than any blow. Briana sobbed louder, grabbing for her husband's hand. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't want it to end up like this." I looked at her, my voice hoarse from holding back. "Don't apologize to him." "Apologize to yourself for forgetting what integrity is worth." Daniel stood, took a deep breath, and shoved his hands into his pockets. He avoided my eyes, staring out the window where the late afternoon sun lit up the row of blazing red maples. "I need to step outside," he said quietly. "Good," I replied. "You should, because in here, I need air to breathe." He nodded without looking at me and walked out. The front door closed so softly it was almost silent, but the sound still left me hollow. I stood in the living room, staring at the two half-finished teacups on the table, one mine, one Briana's. The tea had gone cold, the surface darkening into a dull brown stain. That small scene made the truth plain. Not everything breaks with a sound. Some things shatter in silence. I gathered the documents, stacked them neatly on the table, and turned away. Behind me, Briana still sat with her head bowed, shoulders trembling. I felt no pity anymore. I knew Daniel's silence wasn't just weakness. It was a choice, a cruel choice between two women, his wife and his mother, and he chose the one who knows how to play fragile instead of the one who raised him. As the last light of day slid across the floor, I stood in the kitchen where my family's laughter once echoed. Now, there was only the sound of wind slipping through the doorframe. I poured a glass of water, my hand trembled slightly, but my eyes were dry. I understood that some wounds can't be healed with tears. Some losses don't come from death, but from the moment someone turns their back on the truth. And that afternoon, when Daniel walked out without looking back, I knew from now on I could only rely on myself. What do you think? What happens when the person you trust most is the very one who forces you to become stronger than you thought you could be? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear your perspective. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was still, with only the clock ticking in dry, steady beats, like time scratching at my chest. I sat by the window, looking out at the front yard where the streetlight spilled onto a thin crust of thawed snow. The quiet wasn't peace, it was the pause before a storm. Outside, the wind hissed softly through the maples. I wrapped a wool scarf tighter and stared at the home I'd lived in for more than 40 years. Every corner, every photo on the wall, every teacup with an old lipstick stain witnesses to a life of hard work and honesty. And yet in just a few, for months, it could all be erased by a forged paper and a few lies. I let out a smile without joy. If Briana thought I'd sit still and lose, she was badly mistaken. I stood and walked to the wooden cabinet by the dining room where Robert kept an old safe. No one knew what was inside, not even Daniel. I knelt and wiped the dust from the dial. The numbers had faded, but my hands remembered the sequence muscle memory carved by years. A soft click sounded as the lock released. Inside were a few old notebooks, a velvet box with Robert's wedding ring, and a small black USB drive. I picked it up, my palm cold. This was the key to everything Robert and I had built. Shares in the old logistics company, investment certificates, and even the hidden accounts Robert used to call for emergencies. When he died, I had planned to seal it all away, but now that my daughter-in-law wanted to erase me from my own life, the emergency had arrived. I sat down, plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen lit up and folders appeared one by one: Hale Holdings, Maple Street Property, Trust Account, Nora, all intact. I opened each file, skimming numbers, e-signatures, and stock transactions only Robert and I knew. Every line was now a weapon. I opened my notebook and wrote a list of what to do. 1. Check the status of shares at Hale Holdings. 2. Freeze all joint accounts. 3. Transfer temporary control to the attorney. 4. Compile evidence of forgery. By the last line, my pen shook. Not from fear, but from loneliness. The only person I could trust now was Pauline, the attorney who'd worked with us for over 20 years. I reached for my phone and checked the time. It was close to 11 p.m., but I knew she would be awake. Pauline never sleeps early. After 3 rings, she picked up. Her voice was steady and low, even at that hour. "Marjorie, calling this late, what happened?" I took a breath and told her everything. Every detail: the bank incident, the fake documents, Daniel's silence, Briana's tears. I left nothing out, and on the other end, Pauline listened without interrupting. Now and then I heard the light scratch of her pen. When I finished, her voice came back, calm but firm. "I know you're strong enough not to break, but right now, the most important thing is not to react loudly. Let them believe you're weak." I frowned. "You want me to pretend?" "Not pretend," Pauline said. "Strategy. The quieter you are, the more careless they'll be. You need time to gather proof and prepare a counterclaim. I'll recheck Robert's paperwork, especially the hidden accounts no one knows about. We'll make sure they never see it coming." I sat quietly for a while, looking out the window where the moonlight reflected on the glass. Her words warmed me. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. "Pauline," I said softly, "thank you. But I don't want to only defend. I want accountability." "And you'll have it," she said. "First, let me secure everything legally. Tomorrow I'll send you a temporary authorization form. Sign and return it. Tonight, start archiving anything suspicious." "You did accounting, you know how." I smiled. "Yes, I did. Recordings, photos, saving every detail, every email, every line on a statement, every conversation. Nothing would slip past me again." After we hung up, I sat a long time. The lamp cast a pool of gold over the papers. My shadow stretched across the table. The room was silent except for the clock and the wind under the door. I felt a strange strength rising, not anger, but clarity. I opened a drawer and took out the small recorder Robert used in meetings. I replaced the batteries and tested it. 1, 2, 3. My voice sounded clear and steady. I slipped it into my pocket with my phone. Before bed, I opened the laptop again and created a new folder. I named it Aurora because Robert used to call me that whenever he said, "You shine brightest when cornered by darkness." I locked the USB back in the safe, turned the dial, and heard the familiar click. Then I stood and looked around the dim room. Everything looked the same, but I knew that from tonight on, every step I took would have purpose. Briana thinks I'm just a frail old woman. Daniel thinks I'll endure in silence. Neither understands that when a mother is betrayed, what she loses isn't trust, it's mercy. And when the first morning light touched the window, I was ready for the quiet war. I was about to start not with shouting, but with evidence, numbers, and recordings sharp enough to cut. That night, I sat and watched the sunrise, whispering a promise only I could hear. I will take back everything with silence, sharper than a blade. The next morning, a veil of fog hung over the sky. I was at the kitchen table pretending to read the paper when I heard Briana's car pull up hard out front. Her heels hammered down the hallway. The door flew open so fast the picture frames rattled. She stormed in, face tight with anger, eyes red from no sleep. "What did you do to the secondary account?" she snapped, the sweetness gone. "The bank says my access is suspended. They said it was on your orders." I folded the paper, looked up calmly as if I had no idea. "Oh? Maybe it's a security audit. They're careful these days." Briana let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Don't play dumb, Mom. I know exactly what you're doing. You want to cut me out?" I only shrugged and didn't answer. A spark of rage flashed in her eyes. She spun and shouted, "Daniel, get down here now!" A few seconds later, my son came down the stairs, face tired, dark circles under his eyes. "What's going on?" Briana turned, and the tears turned on like a switch. "Your mom locked all the accounts, even our savings. I can't pay the insurance or Nora's tuition. She's punishing me!" Daniel frowned and looked at me, wary and conciliatory at once. "Mom, is that true? Why didn't you tell us first?" I answered evenly. "That account is in my name. I'm protecting my own money." Briana burst into tears, covering her face. "See, Daniel? I told you. Your mom never trusted me. She thinks I'm a thief in this house." She turned to him, voice trembling but edged like a blade. "Do something. If she doesn't hand over control, we have nothing. This house, even that little company you're working at, it's all in her name. If she changes the will, we lose everything." I watched them in silence like an outsider. Daniel hesitated, twisting the hem of his shirt. He wasn't cruel enough to take my side, and not brave enough to stand up to his wife. Seeing him falter, Briana stepped closer, tears streaming, her voice cutting. "What about Nora? She needs a future, stability. Your mom grips everything like we're outsiders. If you don't make her sign the power of attorney again, don't blame me for doing what you won't like." I recognized the threat instantly. It wasn't the first time I'd seen her use tears to manipulate. But this time I didn't feel pain, only the clarity of watching her slide deeper into the trap she set. Daniel dropped his gaze, voice small. "I'll talk to Mom." "But Briana, don't make this worse." She inhaled sharply and nodded, but triumph flickered in her eyes. I said nothing. I simply stood and went to my study. Behind me, their voices faded and then stopped. I closed the door, leaned back in my chair, and woke my computer. On the desk, my phone lit up with a system alert. "Interior cameras restored." I smiled to myself. No one knew that last week I'd asked Pauline to contact Robert's old tech to restore the entire security system, the one Briana had accidentally disconnected. Now every corner of the house could capture every conversation, gesture, and glance. I opened the playback and selected the last hour. On screen, Briana sat close to Daniel in the living room, her voice tight, her face twisted with anger. "You have to make her sign the trust again." Once she loses signing authority, this house will be ours. After that, we do what we want." I paused the frame, scrubbed back, and played it again, listening to each word clearly. "This house will be ours." I leaned back and drew a long breath. My heart pounded not from shock, but from certainty. Everything stood naked now. She wasn't pretending to be the dutiful daughter-in-law anymore. I saved the video as Briana, Proof 1. Then I opened the kitchen camera, their conversation afterward. Daniel sat with his head down while she stood close, voice low. "If you won't do it, I'll tell the lawyer she needs guardianship. Once the medical file goes in, she won't be able to fight." I paused again. My hand trembled slightly, but my eyes were brighter than ever. There was no room left for doubt or hope that they'd realize their mistake. The part of me that pitied them died the second I heard, "This house will be ours." I moved the cursor to cloud backup. Pauline had set up a private encrypted drive for me. Every piece of evidence would be mirrored there, safe and untouchable. I sat watching the screen for a long time. The pain was gone. All that remained was the stillness of someone who has seen the truth to the end. What I felt now was resolve, cold and precise, like a surgeon's blade. Robert used to say, "When they think you're weak, that's when you're strongest." I smiled a little. Yes, right now they think I'm weak, alone, and beaten. That certainty will be what breaks them. I jotted a note. October 14th, 8:42 a.m. Briana threatens Daniel. Quote, "Once she loses signing authority, this house will be ours." I closed the notebook and set down the pen. Outside, gray clouds gathered and wind scraped the window like a warning. But inside me, the wind had changed. When I stepped out of the room, Briana was in the hallway pretending to wipe tears. She looked at me with a strained smile. "Mom, can we talk?" I tilted my head and answered softly, almost flat. "Of course, but this time I'll be the one listening, and you should choose every word carefully." She froze for a moment, and in her eyes I saw for the first time a flicker of real fear. I kept walking down the stairs, my legs steadier than ever. In my head the plan was set. No need to shout, no need to strike back with anger. I only needed the truth, and I had it in my hands. Outside, the sky was turning a deep gray. A storm was coming, but this time I would be the one holding the eye, and when it passed, only the liars would be swept away. I've always believed every storm has its time, and that Sunday night was exactly when it needed to break. I chose dinner as usual. The meal was set out at 7 o'clock, just like all the years since Robert was alive. On the table was the beef stew Daniel loves, and the apple pie Nora always asks for seconds of. I arranged everything as if nothing were out of the ordinary. At first, the atmosphere was calm. Briana forced a smile, Daniel tried to look composed, and I stayed quiet, slowly pouring water into the glasses. The kitchen lights cast a soft yellow glow warm enough to hide the ice underneath. I heard spoons touch plates, thin laughter mixed with strain. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for me to begin. When Daniel set down his knife, I spoke gently, my voice so even it surprised me. "This is a good meal. I'm glad we're all sitting together again." Briana smiled, tight and brittle. "Yes, I think we should forget the past and start over." I tilted my head at her, a smile that didn't reach my staying eyes. "I think so too. But before we start over, there's a small thing I want you both to hear." The room went still. I reached into my handbag on the chair and took out my phone. In a few seconds, the screen's light reflected on their faces. I opened the folder. I'd prepared the file named Briana, Proof 1. I set the phone in the middle of the table and pressed play. Briana's voice rang out clear, cold, filling the small kitchen like a sentence being read. "You have to make her sign the trust again. Once she loses signing authority, this house will be ours." The air froze. Daniel stared at the phone screen, his lips parting without sound. Briana went pale, eyes wide, hands stiff on her lap. A few seconds later, she let out a sharp, brittle laugh, trying to steady herself. "Mom, are you serious? I was just joking. Who would actually say something like that?" I didn't answer. I stopped that recording and played the second one. This time it was her threatening Daniel, voice low and controlled. "If you won't do it, I'll tell the lawyer she needs guardianship. Once the medical file goes in, she won't be able to fight." I paused and looked straight at Briana. "Also a joke?" No one laughed. Daniel sat frozen, hands on the table, his face bone white. I watched his eyes flick between me and his wife, like someone waking up in the middle of a nightmare. I opened my bag and pulled out a thick folder. The cover had the bank's logo, Belmont Branch, and a legal verification seal. I set it neatly in the center of the table, my voice soft but clear. "This is the bank's verification. Every document Briana filed the other day. Fake medical forms, forged signatures, invalid seals, all confirmed as forgery." I slid the folder toward them. The paper skimmed across the wood with a small sound that felt heavy as stone. Daniel's hands shook as he opened the pages, eyes moving over the red stamps, the words, "Forgery identified." His hands trembled, then stopped at the signature line. "Oh God," he whispered. "Is this real?" I answered evenly. "Real. And if I hadn't gone to the bank that day, she would have succeeded." Briana shot to her feet, voice catching. "No, I wasn't trying to take anything. I just wanted to help you. You've been forgetting things. I was scared." "Scared?" I cut in, eyes fixed on her. "You weren't scared of me being weak, Briana. You were scared I was still clear." She stood frozen, then tears spilled over. Daniel still hadn't lifted his head. His hands covered his face. The kitchen was dead quiet. The only sound the clock ticking on the wall, keeping time for a funeral march. I looked at my son. For the first time, he seemed small, not in age, but under the weight of shame. "Son," I said softly, "you once promised you wouldn't let anyone hurt me. But today, you sat still and watched it happen." Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He only bowed his head, voice breaking. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't answer right away." I gave a small nod, then turned to Briana. She had collapsed into the chair, shoulders shaking. All that was left of her now was smeared makeup and raw fear. I spoke, light but sharp as a thin blade. "I'm not crazy, Briana. I'm more awake than you think." It was like the oxygen disappeared. The words rang out, spread through the kitchen, and fell onto the cold tile like a bell ending the service. I pulled out my chair and sat again, carefully stacking the papers, the recordings, the confirmations. My voice stayed even, not loud, not soft, just enough. "All of this is stored legally. One copy at my attorney's office, one in a secure drive. I don't need to shout, and I don't need to beg anyone to believe me. The truth knows how to speak for itself." Daniel was silent for a long time. Finally, he lifted his head, eyes red, and murmured, "I didn't think. Briana, why did you do it?" Briana looked at him, sobbing. I was afraid of losing everything." "Your mom never shares. She always acts like she's the only one who's right. I just wanted a little control, a little security." I looked at her and sighed. "Security? You can't build security on lies, Briana. You can buy comfort, but you can't buy back trust once it's gone." She dropped her head and cried like a child. Daniel just sat there, eyes empty, hands limp. I stood and gathered the papers, my voice barely more than a breeze. "I won't call the police tonight. But tomorrow morning, I'll be with my attorney. I can't live with you two for one more day." No one stopped me. Only Briana's muffled sobs trailed behind. I walked to the sink, laid my hand on the cold stone, and looked out the window. Beyond it was the garden Robert used to tend, now swallowed by the dark. In the glass, I saw my face older, harder, but no longer trembling. Behind me, I heard Daniel say softly, like someone who'd just lost something precious, "Mom, I don't know what to say." I turned back and smiled, light as air. "Then don't say anything. Just listen." I walked slowly toward the door and stopped at the threshold. "I spent my life teaching you right from wrong, but in the end, you made me do the opposite, teach someone else a lesson in honesty, and you're going to witness it." I didn't look back. I went straight up the stairs, leaving behind a kitchen that had once been warm, now thick with the smell of cold food and dense silence. At the top step, I heard Daniel call out, voice tight with tears, "Mom, I'm sorry." I stopped without turning and spoke quietly, steady but firm. "I know, but sorry isn't an end. It's just the start of waking up." Then I kept going, step by steady step, like someone who had just crossed the threshold of the past and was walking straight into the light of truth. On the morning of the trial, a light rain fell. I went to the Belmont County Courthouse with Pauline, the friend and attorney, who'd stood by me these past months. She opened a black umbrella, covering half of me from the gray drizzle. The air carried the metallic chill of iron, just like my mood, hard, with no room for mercy. The courthouse grounds were unusually crowded. A few local reporters stood outside, taking notes and photos. News of the inheritance fraud case where a mother was betrayed by her daughter-in-law had spread over the past few days, drawing curiosity. I didn't look at them. I walked slowly, my old black shoes hitting the stone steps in solid, certain taps. Pauline laid a hand on my shoulder, her voice low and firm. "You made it here, Marjorie. Now let justice speak." I nodded. In my hands was a thick file, every piece of evidence, from recordings and videos to bank statements, numbered and neatly sealed. Each page was the result of sleepless nights under a warm lamp, writing down every small detail. When we entered the courtroom, Briana was already there. She sat beside her own attorney, hair perfectly styled, makeup meticulous, but her eyes couldn't hide the panic. Daniel sat behind her, not at her table. My son's face was gaunt, like he'd aged 10 years in a few weeks. The judge was Unfit, a woman around 60, stern but fair. When she struck the gavel, the sound split the room in two, truth on one side, lies on the other. Pauline stood and spoke briefly but sharply. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Marjorie Hale, was exploited and deceived by her own daughter-in-law, Briana Hale. This individual forged medical records and signatures and used my client's bank accounts to attempt to seize her assets, in clear violation of elder protection laws and financial fraud statutes." I sat still, eyes on the bench, not looking at Briana, but I heard her quick, shallow breaths, and I felt a tightness in my chest. Not pity, regret for someone who destroyed herself with ambition. Briana's attorney stood, talking fast, trying to sound calm. "Your Honor, my client acted out of genuine concern. She believed her mother-in-law was experiencing cognitive issues and simply wanted to manage finances to avoid risk. This was a misunderstanding. There was no intent to steal." Pauline gave a faint smile, the kind that belongs to someone who already knows she'll win. She opened her case and set a small USB drive on the evidence table. "If it was a misunderstanding, then let the court hear my opposing party's own voice." The room went silent. When the recording played, every word cut the air like a blade. "You have to make her sign the trust again. Once she loses signing authority, this house will be ours." Briana's voice filled the courtroom, clear, cold, precise. No one spoke. Only the sound of rain at the windows. Judge Eleanor raised an eyebrow and leaned forward. Pauline played the second clip, Briana's threat to Daniel. "If you won't do it, I'll tell the lawyer she needs guardianship. Once the medical file goes in, she won't be able to fight." When it ended, there was nothing left to say. Briana sat frozen, hands clasped together, shaking. The judge looked at her, voice stern. "Miss Hale? Is that your voice?" Briana swallowed hard, lips trembling. I don't remember." Maybe someone edited, Eleanor cut in, firm. Forensic audio confirms no edits. The voice is a 100% match. Do you have anything else to add? No reply. Briana bowed her head, shoulders curling like the air had doubled in weight. Pauline submitted more verified bank documents, statements, confirmation of forged signatures, and a report from the real physician who stated he never signed any diagnosis of cognitive impairment. Everything laid out precise, airtight. The judge reviewed each page, eyes cold as steel. Finally, she set the stack down and looked straight at Briana. These actions are not only civil violations, they are criminal. You intentionally forged documents, exploited an elderly person, and violated property rights. It landed like a second hammer blow. Briana broke into sobs, crumpling into her chair, hands over her face. Daniel, sitting behind, stood. He walked forward slowly, voice unsteady but clear. Your Honor, may I speak? I'm Mrs. Marjorie Hale's son. I stayed silent too long. I knew my wife was wrong, and I didn't stop her. I accept responsibility for my cowardice, and I apologize to my mother. He bowed deeply, voice tight. I looked at my son, and my heart twisted. The hurt, the betrayal, the anger in me seemed to melt for a moment, leaving only fatigue and a gentle sadness, like a damp cloth laid over my heart. The judge nodded, voice softer but still firm. An apology is a good beginning, but justice must still be served. She lifted the gavel and struck it 3 clean times. The court orders, all of Mrs. Marjorie Hale's assets and accounts are to be restored. All related transactions are frozen and under investigation. The defendant, Briana Hale, is charged with forgery and financial abuse of an elder. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed through the room. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not from joy relief. Something heavy in me, after months of strain, was finally set down. As people rose, I stood and walked slowly into the hallway. My heels tapped evenly on the stone floor. Cold air swept in from the big door, carrying the smell of rain, the scent of freedom. Daniel caught up and walked beside me. He didn't speak, just walked, his hands clenching and unclenching. At last he said, low and hoarse, "Mom, I'll take care of Nora, and I'll fix what I broke." I stopped and looked at him. You don't need to fix the past, Daniel. Live so Nora doesn't have to repeat it. He nodded, eyes wet. Briana was led out of the courtroom, hands shaking, face drained. She glanced back, lost. I didn't look at her. I turned away and stepped out the big door. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were thinning, and late sunlight angled through the wet leaves. I drew a deep breath, my chest lighter than it had been in months. Pauline came out and gently took my hand. Justice was late, but it came. I smiled, eyes on the end of the rain-wet street. Yes, some wounds don't need revenge, only proof that we were right. I walked down the courthouse steps, the wind tossing my silver hair. Traffic hummed in the distance, life falling back into its ordinary rhythm. And in the middle of it, I no longer felt like a victim. I was a survivor, standing steady in the wreckage, carrying the calm of someone who had won herself back. That day, for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I felt only freedom, the kind no one can ever sign away again. 2 weeks after the trial, on a late afternoon with sunlight spilling gold across the lawn, I heard a gentle knock. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there thinner, eyes hollow, his shirt wrinkled like he'd walked out of a storm that wouldn't end. He was quiet for a few seconds, then spoke softly. "Mom, can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside, letting him into the small lakeside house I'd just moved into. It was peaceful here, only a 10-minute drive from town, but just far enough to breathe without the past chasing you. Daniel sat down, hands locked together, unsure where to begin. After a while he said, "Mom, I know it's over, but I can't live with myself if I don't say this." I sat across from him, waiting. He took a breath, voice shaking but honest. I was manipulated, Mom. Briana knew how to make me feel guilty, to make me believe that if I didn't take her side, I was a bad husband, a bad father. I didn't see that I was losing you piece by piece. I looked at my son, and I wasn't angry anymore. Just a soft sadness, like wind across the water. I spoke quietly, slow as breathing. No one controls a person with a conscience, Daniel. They only use your silence. And you let silence speak for you for too long. He bowed his head, his knuckles whitening. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. I just hope you'll let me be your son again. I stood, walked to him, and laid a hand on his shoulder. You've always been my son. Sometimes we have to walk through loss to see who's truly still there. His eyes filled. When he left, I watched until his car disappeared behind the trees along the shore. Relief spread through me, not because I'd forgiven, but because I no longer carried resentment. I started over at 70. This little house by the lake used to be the getaway Robert and I bought back in the 80s. Now it's truly home. Every morning I wake before the sun has time to slip through the curtains. I roll out my yoga mat in the living room, breathe deep, and feel the cool air on my skin. Some mornings, the lake lies under a light veil of fog. I sit by the window with a cup of peppermint tea and turn the pages of a book. The only sounds are sparrows calling on the porch and the whisper of wind through the curtains. That feeling quiet, whole, completely free was something I never truly had in all those years of being a wife, a mother, a woman who endured. I planted a small garden by the porch, yellow daisies, lavender, and a few white roses Robert always loved. I tend them daily and talk to them like old friends. Sometimes I think, if flowers had souls, they'd understand me better than the people I once lived with. In the afternoon, I walk the lakeshore with a small notebook to capture stray thoughts, quotes, old memories, things I want to leave for Sophie, the one grandchild I fully trust. Sophie visits every weekend. She's 12, hair the color of honey, eyes as clear as the lake out front. Every time Daniel's car stops, she jumps out and shouts, "Grandma, my hero." I laugh and open my arms. She hugs me tight, the scent of apple shampoo in her hair making my throat catch. In her eyes there's no pity, only pride, as if I'd stepped out of a fairy tale where the hero is an old woman. That afternoon we sat on the porch. Sophie bit into a slice of my fresh apple pie and asked, "Grandma, why aren't you mad at Dad anymore? He looks so sad." I smoothed her hair and smiled. "Anger only wears you out, sweetheart. Some people aren't bad, they're weak, and sometimes the best thing we can do is refuse to be weak with them." Sophie thought for a moment, then looked up. "Grandma, I'm scared that when I grow up, people won't believe me like they didn't believe you." I looked into her eyes and saw myself years ago naive, wanting to be understood, wanting to be trusted. I squeezed her hand, my voice slow but certain. "You don't need everyone to believe you. You need to believe yourself, and never let anyone speak for you, Sophie. Once you let them decide who you are, you lose your own voice." She nodded, eyes bright with understanding. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I want to be strong like you." I smiled, gentle and deep. "No, sweetheart, I'm not stronger than anyone else. I just learned that silence can be a way to fight when it walks with the truth." A soft breeze stirred, carrying a hint of lavender. I looked out at the lake, where the sunset lay like a thin sheet of silk. Peace settled in my chest. Sometimes I think of Briana not to resent her, but to remind myself that greed and deceit always carry a price. As for me, I finally paid off the debt of blind trust. At night, I sit at my desk and write, "Happiness isn't being loved forever. It's knowing when to leave so you can keep yourself." Then I set down the pen and listen to the crickets and the faint slap of water on the shore. I smile, close my eyes, and feel the night breeze in my silver hair. My life, which once felt withered, is blooming again quietly, steadily, and brightly in its own way. And I know that when the sun rises, I'll start another day no longer afraid of losing anyone and never letting anyone speak for me again. A year after the trial, I stood on a small stage in Belmont's downtown hall beneath a new plaque gleaming with the words, "Hail Foundation for Elder Justice." It's the nonprofit I founded with the assets I reclaimed, with one purpose: to support older women who've suffered financial abuse or been stripped of control by their own families. When I lifted the microphone, faces in the audience, mostly silver-haired women like me, looked up, eyes full of understanding. Some nodded, some quietly wiped tears. I knew many of them had been called useless, too old to be heard. I wanted them to know none of us are truly weak. I spoke low and steady, each word etched into the air. People think age is a sign of weakness. In truth, we're just watching in silence. When you've lived long enough, you learn when to keep quiet and when to speak. Applause rolled through the hall like a warm wave. I smiled and turned to my side where Sophie stood. She wore a simple white dress, her eyes bright, her small hand gripping mine. I felt the warmth in that palm, the passing of the torch to a new generation, clearer and stronger. Sophie looked up and whispered, "Grandma, you're my hero." I squeezed her hand and answered softly but sure, "No, sweetheart, real heroes don't let others define them. And you'll be one of them." Late light poured through the tall windows, reflecting off the bronze plaque. For a moment, I could almost see Robert smiling somewhere, proud that I hadn't let fear decide the rest of my life. After the ceremony, I sat as the hall emptied. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the river, a pale band of orange across the horizon. I sipped tea, listened to the wind, and felt my heart light as paper. I had walked through betrayal, loss, and justice, and now there was only peace. I watched Sophie helping staff clean up and realized something simple. I hadn't just reclaimed assets. I'd reclaimed a voice my own, and for women like me. If you're still listening, thank you for walking with me to the end. I believe that wherever you are, big city or small town, you understand that justice and dignity don't have an expiration date. Tell me where you're watching from, so I'll know how far this story has traveled. And if, like me, you believe that women who stand up at any age deserve to be heard, please leave a comment, or subscribe so we can keep telling stories of courage, freedom, and stubborn love. I'm Marjorie Hale, and here's the last lesson I want to leave. Don't let anyone speak for you because your voice is the greatest power no one can take away.